Hi, welcome to another episode of In the Line of Wire. I have with me today a very special guest. He is the chairman of Pasha, Mr. ImranZia. Hi, Imran.
Okay, thank
Good to have you on the set of In the Line of Wire.
Oh, that's my first time. I'm enjoying it.
Imran is also the CEO of Vaze in Lahore, a small company which we'll ask him about and what it does. It's in some exciting space. So Imran, after today's CIO, the Year Ahead event, I think the first thing we should talk about is what do you think of what's happening in the IT policy space and where do you think it should be headed?
Well, there has been IT policy. First of all, I guess thanks to CIO Pakistan for arranging a wonderful event, because I think the panels were great. There was a lot of good discussion. And I think today was, in my opinion, a good model for what needs to be done for the IT policy.
Right.
Because if you look at today's event, there were people from all walks of life. We had, in one panel, we had 4 doctors, meaning PhDs on the panel, and of course they had a certain perspective.
I was quite overwhelmed by that.
Right, exactly. And then in others, you had people from industry. You had people from all walks of life, especially in the audience, who asked some very relevant questions. There were people like Shehzad from Bytes for All. So who represent the larger user community and their interests in terms of privacy and in terms of their rights to information and community radio and things like that. So having said that, I mean that also tells you the range of things that need to be addressed in an IT policy, and it should be more like an ICT policy, not just an IT policy. It's just not about software companies, or it's just not about one segment.
It's not a one sector agenda.
Right, exactly.
It's a national agenda.
Exactly,
really,
exactly. And as at one point I had made the comment during the proceedings that at the end of the day, we are trying to maximize the value of ICT technologies for the benefit of our whole population. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Right.
It's not for the benefit of one segment to the exclusivity of of others. So that's very important. And I think another very important factor is that we forget, and I feel very strongly about it, is that 60% of our population still lives in rural areas.
Correct.
And of course, with Universal Support Fund, there is a lot of good work that has been done by the federal government in terms of getting the IT infrastructure and the basic IT infrastructure in terms of connectivity to the rural areas. But the problem is that's not where we need to stop, and that's why that's why a coherent IT policy, ICT policy is needed, because where is the content? Okay, where are the e-learning opportunities? We know that the schools in rural areas are suffering. The students don't have the same quality of teachers, the same quality of material available to them.
And this can be provided over IT infrastructure.
Absolutely, through broadband, through classes.
Right.
I mean, you see that happening all over. I mean, we do video conferencing, and I'm not saying we're going to be doing video conferencing, but at least it can be one way.
Imran, but like in Australia, because it's so spread out, I have seen the use of ham radio and things like that to deliver lectures. But even that hasn't been used because of the policy regarding radio.
Right, exactly. I mean, there are no community radios. I mean, I'll share a very small anecdote with you, because I mean, at least one half of my distant family at least lives in a village, because my parents came from a village. So a small anecdote. I come from a region in Punjab which is known as the citrus area, where there's a lot of citrus groves, and in the last 2 years, what has happened is that there has been an epidemic of some sort of a disease where part of the plant just withers away. After a while, it's just not functional anymore, and the only thing you can do is just cut away those branches. And to the extent that this year, in our area where we belong to, the yield has been half of what it was last year. And funny thing is that, so I have a relative, and last year I suggested to him that you do something about it. So he went to one of the agriculture institutions, one of the larger agriculture universities in Pakistan, and people didn't even know that this problem existed.
Right.
I mean, in today's day of information technology, I mean,
this should have been communicated, and there should have been a solution to have stopped it before the crop was affected.
Exactly. And now you have to realize that in this sort of circumstance, 6 months is too long a period not to intervene. because you have to realize that it takes up to 3 to 4 years for an orange grove to become productive after you have installed the small plant, and that 4 year can go to waste in a matter of less than a year. So this is an example of where ICT technology, where people are connected and information is pushed to them actively in terms of how to do disease management and how to take care of certain problems that people are seeing. And conversely, in terms of gathering the data from the field and getting it back to the Department of Agriculture and the Food Department in Pakistan, and also to the researchers who are sitting at Pakistan Agriculture Research Council or at universities.
But this is very strange because, as far back as about 5 or 6 years ago, my company actually developed an interactive touchscreen based application where farmers were able to, through video and animation, were able to tell that a crop was being diseased and what to do about it and stuff like that. And then they used the same system to collect data. Now this was 5, 6 years ago, and it was placed in about, I think, 30 or 40 villages in the Punjab. And now 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, this should have gone much further than that.
Right. And exactly, I think that's where that's exactly my point, that we need to have a coherent ICT policy and which cuts across, okay, fine, you provided the connectivity, now what's the next step? I mean,
so health services, education services,
exactly, and then
government public services.
Absolutely. And I think in some ways Pakistan federal government is the big brother, and I think at the end of the day this lies with the Ministry of Information Technology, and I think they need to do something about it. Okay. I mean, taking an example from another country, I mean, I think, for example, Obama supposedly is very forward looking in US, and he for the first time in US has appointed a CIO. So there's a CIO
for his
US,
government.
For his government, right?
We should have. We don't even have a minister. So talk about CIO, forget it. I mean, we don't have a federal minister yet. So IT is not really up there on the map right now.
Right. I mean, and that's unfortunate because it can certainly have so many benefits to the population and for the government itself. I mean, if you look at the government, even from security perspective, there are a lot of benefits to effective use of ICT technologies. I'll give you an example. Our FIA databases, I'm sure, are not talking to the police databases, which are not talking to your NADRA database, which is not talking to your tax database, which is not talking to your banking databases. So just imagine if all these were linked.
And they were talking to each other.
They were talking to each other, right? So if you're at the airport and you're looking at a person and are they involved in foreign exchange violation or not, or you could do all sorts of analysis right there and then, and you could do decision making so much more quickly, and you could actually arrive at conclusions in terms of your investigation so much more quicker. So I think it's also a security benefit that you get, especially given where our country is in terms of everything that's happening around us. So there's tremendous opportunity for the government also to get integrated and where one ministry or one function, a main function of the government talks to another part of the government. So that's very, very important, and I think that's where it has been lacking. So again, going back to the concept of the CIO, there sort of needs to be an office somewhere, and probably would exist in Ministry of Information Technology.
Well, if it existed, see, that's the problem. If it existed in the Ministry of Information Technology, the other ministries consider themselves at par with the Ministry of Information Technology. So possibly it should be in the Prime Minister's office or the President's office, so that they're above, or maybe in the Planning Commission or somewhere like that. So that it would not be at par with the other ministries, and they would then look at it as a central resource.
Right, and maybe the CIO position should really be more of the way you have Governor State Bank of Pakistan. It should not be totally like a ministerial position. It should be more. Well,
let's see what Obama does with the CIO, and then maybe we can learn. And then CIO Pakistan can tell us what we should do with the CIO to the Prime Minister.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So in terms of, look, there have been two parallel processes of the IT policy, and there's been a lot of discussion. What can we do positively to bring everything back on track?
Well, unfortunately, there is the most recent attempt at formulating an ICT policy has been, there is a task force that Planning Commission has constituted. Unfortunately, we at Pasha have found it to be a very closed process. We have given some very active suggestions, and one of the suggestions that was actually reaffirmed by a lot of other stakeholders, because if you talk to the ICT people, ICT policy folks who are conducting this right now, One of their concerns is that, well, if you involve the broader stakeholders, since there are so many stakeholders, it becomes very difficult to arrive at anything at all, and it becomes a long, drawn-out process. And my initial response to that is, okay, my initial response is, so what? I mean, this is something that's going to affect you for the next 5 to 10 years. So if it takes 6 months worth of investment, it's worth it. But let's even say that their argument was valid, and it indeed is problematic to have so many stakeholders. So there was a very simple suggestion, for example, we made, and we said, okay, fine, why don't you do the following, that once you have come up with an initial set of recommendations by whomever you are interacting with, make it public, make it open for public comments, so that maybe publish it on the web, and then have the civil society come back and comment on it, and maybe they'll find certain holes in it, that certain things are not being addressed, or it might be the case that they don't agree with, the public at large does not agree with certain aspects of what's being recommended, and then we can deal it with that way, and then have and then there should be a way to address those concerns in a short amount of time, maybe over a month or 2 months time, and you have fairly decent document, but even that was not entertained. So I'm not sure what one does not want to doubt the motives of what the purpose of this policy is, but it certainly is not very open right now.
My take is that possibly it is just a business stakeholders group, and it is not something that you can call a national ICT policy.
Right, and I think we have talked to some of the people involved, higher ups in this effort, and one of the responses that we have gotten back is that, well, from an industry perspective, let's see what we can get from the government in the next 1 year, and they're looking at it as a short-term plan. But my point to that would be, if you want a bailout plan, or if you want sort of a Marshall Plan for the
that's
ICT.
Fine too.
But that's a totally separate thing from an IT policy. It's not policy.
Yeah.
So let's not corrupt the policy making apparatus.
Right.
And keep that separate from any special
list of recommendations or programs.
Right. And every country is doing it. I mean, granted, Obama is doing it. I mean, they're doling out a lot of money, and they're saying, look, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. And certainly there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built in Pakistan.
Right.
And this would be the right time to invest.
Right.
In that infrastructure, in terms of the ICT infrastructure, for example, the integrated system that I talked about at a government level to begin with. So that's fine, and the government should do it, and we should lobby the government for doing that. But again, that's totally separate.
It should be different from
Absolutely.
the policy making process.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move away now from the policy. Tell me about, you've been chairman of Pasha, you took over midstream last year as well, when the position was vacated, and this year you've been elected to the position. What is Pasha doing for its members, and where does it see that it has to go in the next 6 months to a year?
Sure. So there are three things that, at a very high level, there are three goals of Pasha, in my opinion. About 1/3 of our effort is dedicated toward just strengthening our companies, making sure that our companies have the right tools, they're equipped right, and to run their business on a day-to-day basis. And
by tools, you mean capacity training?
Capacity training, exactly. Okay. If the company needs special training in certain areas, and there's only so much we can do, because Pasha is a volunteer organization. I mean, you're the president, and you're the only person who's full-time. I mean, the rest of it is all volunteer basis.
Right. Even that is an improvement from about a year and a half ago.
Right, exactly. Right. And I think it is making a difference, and we'll learn more as we go along. The next 1/3 that I would say is working with the government to make sure that the policies are in line with what would benefit the industry.
Right.
In terms of furthering the business, and of course furthering the business means more jobs in ICT area, which eventually benefits the graduates and the community at large. And finally, the last 1/3 of what we are engaged in is just building an image of Pakistan and trying to get some market access for our companies. So those are the three different areas. Are we entirely successful in all these areas? We've been trying very hard. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is that yes, there is Pasha, but then based on volunteer time, there's only so much we can do. And I think there needs to be a very strong public-private partnership here, because I think there are a lot of resources that, for example, PSCB, Pakistan Software Export Board, has. But Pasha has tried to work with PSCB in the past, but that interaction needs to be more it needs to be more fruitful than it has been, if I can say that, because it seems like at times PSAB has its own agenda, and it does not quite fall in line with what Pasha as an industry body would like it to do.
Right.
So I think the government needs to really look at how it's channeling. And of course, when we talk to the government would say, okay, we made this much investment last year in information technology, so
and what have you delivered?
What have you delivered? But my point is that yes, you made investment, but then you also determined what you wanted to do, and you instituted the programs that you wanted to institute without our input. So you cannot be running this show yourself and then holding us accountable for the results. It does not work that way. If you are going to hold us accountable for delivering the results, then you need to give us say into what programs need to be put in place, because we are the one closest to our companies, and we know what their needs are. But Imran,
you're on the board of PSEB. Don't you have a say in what PSEB does?
Well, yes and no. For example, give you an example. Last 2 days, I was in Islamabad for 2 days because I was called by PSEB to participate in a discussion on building an IT park in Chak Shehzad in Islamabad. And as we know, there's a lot of problem in terms of availability of cost-effective office space in Islamabad. The thing that totally surprised me was that there wasn't enough homework done in the proposal being put forward in front of a committee that's carved out of the PSEB board. And they were talking about rent at 150 rupees per square foot.
Which is not affordable by our companies.
Yeah,
most of our companies.
absolutely. And my point with that would be, PSAB actually should have done a survey in terms of what the needs of the companies are and what they can afford. And of course, we know that because, we interact with our companies a lot. And literally my words to the consortium that was putting together this deal was that, look, at anything above 80 or 90 rupees a square foot, and that's even high.
Yeah.
According to that's the maximum that we can afford as an industry. This thing is dead on arrival. You're not going to get many companies moving into this.
But don't you get the feeling that when the government does this kind of assessment, they talk to the large companies within the sector and then determine that's what the entire industry is looking at?
Yeah, it's funny how that happens, because
there are different sizes of companies.
Yeah,
there are large companies, and certainly their interests should be upheld as well. But many of them are very small and mid-sized companies.
Right.
So when doing a survey, the whole sample size should be taken
into
consideration.
If you look at our industry, only 20% of the companies are what we would consider are large companies, and their needs certainly are different. Than they can afford more expensive office space, and they can afford more amenities just because of their sheer size.
Right.
But that's not the heart of the industry, and if you really look at it, the people who need the help most are companies which are less than 100 people. Those are the companies that need help so that they can grow quicker and grow faster. And that's what the sweet spot of a lot of these efforts should be. And if you want to cater to the 20% of the industry, fine. We can maybe build different classes of office spaces for different segments. With most of the office space, in my opinion, going to where most need is, which is 80% of the industry, which is less than 100
or they can 100. Build this high-class parks and subsidize the smaller companies a lot more than they
Right. And that's the kind of thought process that needs to go into an effective IT park, and I don't think that's being done right now. And I had huge reservations about what's being proposed at Chak Shehzad in Islamabad. So answering your question started, aren't we part of the board?
Yeah, because as chairman of Pasha, you're on the board of.
So in this case, we did have some leeway, and we were able to influence, and that process is back to the drawing board, and the people involved are supposed to bring back another proposal in terms of what might be more feasible to do.
Right.
But the problem is that in a larger scheme of things, we haven't had a board meeting in the last 8 months. We haven't had one. So, how can you run?
No company runs like that.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think part of that is that just the structure of the board itself is so complex. I think you remember you were in a meeting with Shaukat Tareen earlier in the year, and he himself proposed that the PSAB board needs to be restructured so that there's more representation from the industry. Right now, the only representation that industry has is there was one other member company which is on the board also, and that company has resigned. for their reason, for whatever reason in the last couple of
So you're the
months.
only person from
I'm
the
only
private
person
sector.
from
The rest are all government representatives.
government representatives, and it's so hard to get them. And right now there's not even an IT minister, who's supposed to be the sort of the leader,
CEO of the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And so this portfolio lies under the prime minister. So that's even harder to have a board meeting, because where is the prime minister going to find the time to? I hope he does, but it's unlikely given the kind of responsibilities he has and the range of things that he's involved in. So those are the issues. So I think we are glad that government at least trying to do something about it, but then I think it needs to spend whatever it's want to invest in IT sector more, getting more input from the industry, and maybe giving industry more assistance in running programs, so that we can make our companies more increase their strength, and have more innovative programs in terms of training, and again the point being that we are the people who are closest to the where the delivery needs to happen. So that has been a challenge, really working with government agencies to really channel the resources, so that it's very easy for me to say, okay, we'll have a program, a sales training program of some sorts for our companies, but it takes resources, it takes money, and being Pasha totally being a volunteer organizations, would appreciate if help was available, and somebody from the government was actually actively working with us to actually help us deliver that sort of service to our constituents. So I think that public-private partnership needs to be really looked at, and how it's in the context of software industry, how it has performed over the years. So somebody really needs to take a hard look at
and they could be more active in the policy making process as well.
Absolutely.
Which is where their strength would be, because they are closely associated with government, whereas we are further away from them.
Right, exactly.
Okay, now tell me a little about what's happening in the industry. We've been interviewing on the Web Studio a number of innovative companies and the kind of products that they're delivering. What is the feel, the sense that you get about what is actually happening in the industry now? What kind of companies are starting to form or have formed, and what kind of work are they involved in?
So let me just start out by saying, taking a saying from a different land, but when they're going at stuff, the tough get going. And I think to a certain extent that has happened to Pakistani software industry also. I think given where we are in terms of our maturity, we are sort of the new kid on the block compared to some of the benchmarks out there like India and other software destinations. I think we have matured much more quickly, and partly you could say that because we have the benefit of looking at what the other people have done and learning from their mistakes. But I think partly it has been because of our unique challenges, because it's much harder for us to get into services business, because there's already our 100-pound gorilla sitting on our eastern borders, and all credit to them, they have earned it, and nothing against them. It just the natural course of markets that the first player always is the dominant player, and that's happening in certain markets. But I think the natural outcome of that is that we can be competing head on with where a lot of existing large markets have made their mark, so a follow-up to a corollary to that is that I think we are seeing a lot more product companies in Pakistan. Given where we are in terms of maturity, I think I'm actually amazed that there's so much innovation going on in our industry. We have companies all the way from companies who are involved in making games for PCs, for iPhone. We have a lot of iPhone applications being developed right now. There are a lot of mobile applications being developed right now, and that's a very healthy trend, because the thing about innovation is that it has a multiplier effect. If I am a 10% company and I can come up with the next product, it could be used by millions of people all around the globe. So the multiplier effect is just huge. If we are just going to tailor our software industry so that it just is delivering services to other people, that is not very scalable. And it takes a lot of people to deliver a huge amount. We can never be in services, will never be as big a market as India is. for delivering services, because we just don't have the number of people.
Right.
You know, we are almost 10 times smaller or 8 times smaller, depending on how you look at the numbers. And our industry, if we were just to rely being a service provider only, the best we can do is that we'll be 1/8 of, if India is the benchmark, 1/8 of where India is, or maybe do slightly better. But I think
as product companies, we're doing quite well.
Right. I mean, I think I'm not saying that we had huge successes, but I think it's beginning to show. I mean, we are beginning to get noticed. We have companies which are very, very successful on, you know, Apple's App Store, for example, where you can go out and post an application and people can download it. So there have been, you know, a number of successes there. You know, we have companies like Sofizar out of Lahore, which have done very, very well. Yeah. In their own niche markets. So I think that's...
And we have 3 winners from Epicta this year.
Yeah, exactly. And even Epicta, people were surprised that, you know, Pakistan, okay, 3 winners.
3 out of 16
yeah,
winners
exactly.
coming from Pakistan is great.
Okay, we had a banner year definitely last year, and hopefully we'll repeat it or improve it this year. We go there every year. So, and that's a good event for us, because I think it puts our name out there, right, that we count. And I think you were there last year when somebody made this remark, oh, you know, you won 3 in 3 categories. Wow, yeah. That's amazing. So it was an eye opener for some people that, correct, you know, Pakistan could be so far ahead. I mean, it's not very far back. 4 years ago, they used to just give us a consolation prize, because everybody who comes in would get at least some prize.
Right.
And all
so that you don't feel left out.
Right, exactly. And all we used to bring back
special
was,
mention.
Yeah, special mention. But, you know, it was...
Which is just a piece of paper. Here we had 3 trophies.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We said, yay!
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it was great. I think it was a great motivation for us as an industry as well.
Right.
And we really, I think we were all very proud to be part of that moment.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
Now tell me a little about you. Other than being an entrepreneur, and we'll come back to what VAZE actually does. You also teach.
Yes, I teach.
You teach at FAST in Lahore.
At FAST, Lahore.
And what do you teach?
I teach. My passion is entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur. I believe. Well, just a side comment. I mean, I think entrepreneurship is also a disease.
Okay.
I mean, once you're an entrepreneur, you can never go back to working for somebody, and, you know, once you're afflicted with that virus, you know, it's, you know, you're, as my wife would say, you know, you're damaged goods.
I wouldn't quite say that.
I mean, she would rather prefer me to have a regular 9-to-5 job, and of course, you know, she probably is hitting right now that I'm in Karachi for a day and a half, and you know, I could be in Lahore, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I think, I mean, I would not call myself a very successful entrepreneur. I think I consider myself as a student, and I think that's the attitude that I would like people to take. That that's what I've seen, that successful people always are in a learning mode. That you know, there's always things that are to be learned, and there are certain things you're good at, and there are certain things you're not good at, and when you're not good at, you surround yourself with people who are good at those things.
Correct.
So it's always a teamwork.
And this is what we're always telling young people who want to start companies.
Exactly. But going back to your question, I mean, I think I do teach entrepreneurship for 2 reasons. One is that it's my way of giving back to the society, so that's the altruistic reason, and I like to challenge and get challenged by young minds, which is much sharper than I am now. They're getting old.
You're slowing down,
right? And keeps me on my toes. But it's just fun to be with a lot of the youth of this country, and in some ways being able to shape up their minds and their value system and how they should be looking at the world, and when they go out in real life. Because I mean, my perspective on entrepreneurship is actually somewhat different from other people. I mean, I think some people think of entrepreneurship as creating new businesses and creating these vehicles for starting new ventures. In my opinion, entrepreneurship is much more than that. I could be a social scientist and I could be an entrepreneur.
Right.
I mean, another, I think it's Muhammad Yunus. Yunus is definitely part of the name. The person.
The Grameen Bank guy.
The Grameen Bank person. I mean, and I think he was an entrepreneur in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, he didn't make a whole lot of money himself, but I think he's a very successful entrepreneur.
Right.
To me, he is a very successful entrepreneur.
Of course.
Okay, he had a passion for something, and he found a way to effectively build an organization that's delivering on the promise.
Right.
That's the hallmark of an entrepreneur. You start with almost nothing and you create something which is wonderful. And that to me is a successful entrepreneur. It does not always have to be within the context of making a lot of money.
No.
And actually the thing that I tell to my students is that, look, it's actually, even when you're doing it for profit motives, it's not about making money. Making money should always be a secondary thing for you.
It comes.
Okay.
If
right.
you're successful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are creating something of immense value to somebody,
yes.
people will open up their wallets and they'll give you the money to buy that thing. And so the money part just becomes a secondary effect.
Right.
And the most successful entrepreneurs will tell you that. You take care of your customers. You try to solve a problem that's important to people, and the money will just follow.
Right.
If you just focus on the money, then that's the wrong approach, and you'll always get yourself in trouble.
Right.
Because
now these kids that you're teaching entrepreneurship to, are these computer science students or are they business students?
Well, this time they're computer science students. This is the first time
okay.
I'm teaching it to computer science. So I'll see how it comes out, because I'm really looking forward to that. Maybe one or two products that can be put into real life comes out, and maybe I can inspire, or maybe
maybe you can even incubate them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that, and that's something that I'm also planning to do this summer. That take a bunch of entrepreneurs and provide them with just a nurturing environment and food and a place to put their computers on, and hopefully they'll do something wonderful over a period of 3 to 4 months.
Good.
So
I think that's what's needed. Instead of having a building which is an incubation center,
right,
we have companies which provide some space and they can offer mentoring and
right, and to a larger extent, I think that I would have liked to see that happening. I mean, now that you mentioned that, I think one of the things that's lacking in our industries, and now I'm diverging from the topic of entrepreneurship, but I think one of the things that's lacking in our industry is that companies are not comfortable working with each other.
Yeah.
Especially, there's definitely a divide between larger companies and smaller companies.
Right.
And I think that needs to change. And I think the larger companies need to respect smaller companies and vice versa. They both have certain strengths and weaknesses. Innovation always happens in a small environment. It's 3 guys or 3 girls who are sort of have this next great idea.
I'm glad you included the girls finally.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I tell this. I mean, again, a side note. I tell because normally technology is associated with then it's a boy thing. For example, people will say that, and I tell people the following, that the first high-level language people used to code in machine
it
code.
Was a woman.
It was a woman, actually. It was a woman from U.S. Navy who invented BASIC.
Yes. Grace Hopper.
Right, exactly. Look, I mean, come on. I mean, the high-level languages came from a woman. So what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So so that's not true. That it's only a boy thing or a man thing. So. Yeah, I mean, innovation always comes in small teams. If you look at when breakthrough technologies have taken shape, whether that was Larry Page and Sergey Brin working on their algorithm for searching information, there were 2 or 3 people.
Or the 2 Steves, Jobs and Wozniak.
Right, Steve Wozniak, or even for that matter, Paul Allen and Bill Gates.
Right.
So innovation always starts in small groups, and so that's the part that the small company can bring in, and the larger company has the discipline to actually take something small and make it big.
Yeah, and the processes.
And then the processes and the project management and all that.
Right.
And one of the things that I would like to see is, even at government level, when a lot of these large contracts are awarded, I think the government should mandate that if they give and most probably the project will be won by a larger system integrator,
definitely.
or a larger organization, that they carve out about 20% of the work and give it to a smaller partner or a set of partners to sort of create that ecosystem.
Right.
And in some ways it could be beneficial, because some of these companies may become acquisition targets for larger players. I mean, I can give you an example of a company where I worked myself. I used to work at Oracle. I worked for about 6 years when I was in US, and they acquired a very small company which used to make basic financial accounting package, and it was essentially general ledger and accounts receivable and accounts payable. And from that starting point,
it became Oracle Financials.
Right. Not only financials, you have now, I mean, the whole Oracle 11i suite of products, which is goes all the way from your sales and marketing and field sales to to manufacturing, to order entry, to financials. So that tells you, and that's the sort of thing that a lot of companies in Pakistan needs to be looking at, because I think a lot of companies, they become silos. They're very successful in their own area, but the thing they don't realize is that very, very quickly at some point they will get out of favor, and things change in technology world so quickly. So they need to always be innovating and creating other new lines of businesses. And one way to create a new line of business is to acquire a small innovative company, capitalize on that technology, put in the financial resources that a smaller company will not have, and maybe open up another totally new division, which might even surpass your current business in 4 to 5 years' time.
Never can tell, yeah.
And I think people need to have that vision, and I think we need to have an ecosystem where smaller companies and larger companies are working together with each other and are comfortable sharing ideas and making things happen. So I think that's
now
very,
finally
very
tell us, before we wind up, tell us about Vaze, where you are CEO. It's
Vaze,
a small company, but it's innovating.
Yeah, we have 25 people. We have purposely taken on work. I mean, we started out as a services company, although there are a couple of products that we are coming out. We have developed an iPhone application which is going to get released. I've been saying that for the last 1 month, that it will be out in the next 1 week.
Right.
But hopefully it will be out in the next couple of weeks. Definitely next week it's going to go to Apple for their initial testing.
Yeah, I'm dying to test it. Yeah.
Right. So we are, because the founders of the company, me and other people who are involved in, we are product people, and even in services, most of the business that we have taken has been working with other companies which are building their products
from the valley, right?
Mostly from Silicon Valley, and we convinced them that why don't you give us part of a subsystem of your application, or a good part of your application, and we can build it in Pakistan for you. And that's sort of our passion, and now we are moving towards actually building some products of our own. So that's very exciting for us. So again, partly we are small by design, because I think when you're doing a lot of innovative things, you can't scale as quickly as if you were doing just implementing Oracle Financials or Siebel Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics solution. We probably could get very, very large very, very quickly, but that's not something where our heart is.
But tell me now, this is a question that comes up again and again. You have a small team and you're developing products. How do you retain these people, because they're core to the work that you are doing?
Right, and I think look, Jahan, the thing that happens is that the people who want to do products,
right?
And people who just want to
code, and do nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, people, I don't want to say that, but I mean, a lot of graduates in Pakistan actually don't have the right perspective, but there are enough of them that have their heart into doing something dramatic and something breakthrough, and those are the people that we look for.
Right.
And those people are not just looking for the fanciest office space or the most money. Not that we don't provide a decent work. I mean, I think by all means our workplace is fairly decent, but I would not compare it with a 1,000-person company in Pakistan, because they have much more financial resources.
Right.
So it's a decent place to work, but I think the motivation is that we're always doing something cutting edge, and there is definitely a set of people that we have found who are excited about it. And
do they get a cut in the product?
Surprisingly enough, you will. I mean, we are fairly generous in terms of, I mean, for example, this iPhone application that I'm building, my promise to my team is that they'll get to retain 25% of the revenue.
Wow,
not 25% of the profit. 25% of the net revenue that we make will get distributed to this.
Wow, that's great.
Vaze employees. So
that's one way to keep them with you.
Yeah, exactly.
And
there's a motivation. You build something. I mean, I give it.
And also have the pride of knowing that you built it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you really, really believe in that this is the next great idea, put in the effort and you will reap the rewards.
Right.
So we'll share the success.
Great. Well, it's been great having you with us, Imran, and we'll visit Vaze in Lahore and talk to your team. And once that product is ready, we want to try it out, and maybe cool tools fools can try it out.
Absolutely.
That was ImranZia, chairman of Pasha and CEO of Vaze. He was here from Lahore for the day to attend the CIO, the year ahead round table that we had today. Well, it wasn't quite a round table, there were many round tables. So we took the advantage of having him in the city to bring him to the set of In the Line of Wire. We'll catch up with him again on In the Line of Wire's next trip to Lahore. In the meantime, this is Jahara signing off.